Much easier to defend banks.
All right. Moving on. Other major banking laws. Oh man, my spine is just tingling. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. All right. The ESA, the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008. Hold on, I gotta get my Joe Biden note card that explains what this is. All right. Or my Donald Trump, which is, I don't know what it is, but I'm just gonna make it up. Either way, that's what we get. All right. So, created in response to the subprime mortgage crisis. Banks stopped paying attention to the rules, and the rules were changed, and all of a sudden banks, and I have been told this for 40 years, bankers are stupid. Boy, that doesn't sound like a Christian thing to say, does it? What do I mean by that? There are periods of time when banks make loans that they should not make. It's like they lose their minds. And then there are other periods of time when banks refuse to make loans that they should make. And it's all a matter of the environment that we're operating in at the time. And banks went crazy. Prime means your best borrower. Subprime means don't loan them money because they can't pay it back. And yet they were loaning money. Okay? And so that was a big part of the financial crisis. Loaning money to people that couldn't pay it back. Not a good idea. Okay? All right. One, it authorized the Treasury to spend up to $700 billion. That was a world record amount of spending at the time. Now it's small. We just spent $2 trillion. But back in 2008, that was a big deal. And everybody in the country was just going crazy that we would create that much debt over such a short period of time. Okay? All right, what did they do with it? They purchased assets. They allowed the central bank and other organizations to buy, what does that mean, distressed assets? They bought bad loans and bad bonds that the banks had invested in. That's what. To keep the banks from going bankrupt. The banks had invested their money in loans and bonds, and those loans and bonds had gone from 100 cents on the dollar to 30 cents on the dollar overnight. And all of a sudden you got most of the major banks in this country, when you're looking at their balance sheet, they're in bankruptcy. And what would that do? Shut down the entire economy. That's what it would do. Okay? It increased the interest rate the Fed paid the banks on the reserves. So it gave banks more incentive to hold more reserves. And the reserves, as you will learn, that's a protection for depositors. And it's protection for banks. Keeping money safely set aside in the event of a problem. And if they're not being paid anything on their reserves, it really hurts them to set that money aside. So the government says, okay, we'll pay you more if you'll set the reserves aside. Okay? Banks went nuts, made risky investments. All right. They allowed the FDIC to increase their cap from 100,000 to 250,000 to keep people from running on the banks. Because that cap wasn't indexed to inflation, it was an old number, and it didn't cover enough. Okay? It allowed the government to inject capital into banks and other lenders. And you know what you call that? Socialism. That's what that is. Inject capital. That's a technical way of saying the U.S. government was now had ownership in private enterprises. Well, that's what socialism is. I'm not being ugly about it. When the government owns the means of production, That is the definition of socialism. Okay? Hey, here's an idea. Let's get the federal government to buy part of General Motors. Socialism. Okay? So what's the alternative to that? If General Motors ain't getting the job done, deep six. And the problem with that is they employ thousands of people and the disruption that comes along with it. So the government looks at it and says, you know, what are we going to do? It's a tough problem. Too big to fail. Yeah. No.
On Tuesday, we went over it's in the minor laws and regulations, we went over the Federal Deposit Insurance Reform Act of 2005, and that raised the FDIC limit from 100,000 to 250,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the disconnect is between this provision here and that provision here. I don't know if it was a temporary fix or not. Tell you what, you look into that, and I'll give you 3 points on the next test. You report back to the class on that issue. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
You get 3 points. Yeah, Dr. E does that. Makes sense, doesn't it? Good for him, good for us. All right. Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act of 2009. All right. Once again, trying to rein in bad business practices. So, no retroactive interest rate increases on existing card balances. So, if you ran up a card balance, the credit card company can't send you a notice in the mail and say, by the way, we used to charge you 9% interest, and we just doubled that. Now, what they can do is say, okay, we're raising our rates from 9 to 18, but it's not on existing balances, it's on any balance above. But on your existing balance, we can't do that. Man, that's like a mafia practice being able to do that. All right. Promotional interest rates. Man, you can't suck people in. Hey, how about 0% interest on your credit card? And you suck people in, and they run up a bill, and then you take it from 0 to 18%. No, we're not going to do that. We've got to run it at least 6 months. Okay? You got to let people know 45 days in advance before you make key changes to the contract. Why? Give them an opportunity to move their money if they don't like what you're going to do. That's what that's about. All right. No over-limit fees unless the cardholder approves over-limit transactions. So what happens is you have a limit on how much you can spend. Okay, you have a credit limit, and then you buy something, and the charge goes through at the credit card company, and then they hammer you with a fee. Okay, that's you see what's going on here, right? Man, you got to be pretty creative. You're sitting in your office with the door closed at a credit card, at a bank, and you're going, okay, man, how can we fleece our customers? Oh, I got a great idea. And that's what they were doing. That's what these companies were doing. Man, people spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do some dirty deeds. That's human nature. You don't think we need Jesus? Woo! Look around. Man. All right. Restricts card issuance to students unless the student has a cosigner. All right. Stop sending advertisements to minors. Okay, in the hopes that they'll run up those bills. Okay, all these bad. I love it, man. What these people are creative geniuses. I love it. They're all named Guido. No offense if you have an Italian background or Sicilian background. All right, ends double billing, which happens when a card issuer charges interest on a previous balance and on a current balance. Okay. I can't remember. I looked at that. So interest each month. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Who wants to look into that for 3 points? Nobody? 3 points, man. Court? No. Ashy, you're the man. Look into that, see what that means, double billing on a credit card. And be prepared on next Tuesday, you guys be prepared to make your report. Okay, don't walk in here and then, well, Dr. E, you didn't tell us to do it. Remind me, say, I got my report. All right, here you go. How about you send in a payment, and let's say you've got 3 layers of interest rates. And so 3 different sections. Let's say you owe $10,000, and $3,300 is at 8%, and $3,300 is at 14%, and $3,300 is at 18%. So you send the bill in, you send the check in, right, for $5,000, and they apply it to the 2 lower rates. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Because they make a lot more money if they keep that high rate balance outstanding. Okay? So they're saying, oh no, any money you get is going to be applied against the highest rate. They're protecting the client, the customer. Okay? Man, these guys, every one of these, I love them. They're so creative. Criminal genius. All right. Extends the time that you pay, time to pay from 14 days to 21 days before they hit you with a late fee. Okay? Giving you an extra week before they hit you with a late fee. Okay? Again, coming up with great ideas, great ways to mess with the customer. All right. How about this? Prohibits gift cards from expiring prior to 5 days. So people buy these gift cards, and then they expire. Okay. So what happens? You lose your money. The bank makes a pure profit on it. Okay. Okay. Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank. And again, every one of these bills that you see names like this, they're the names of the legislators who sponsored and pushed the bill. Dodd-Frank. Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. 2010. All right. Paul Volcker. Who studied, we don't have any econ majors anymore, so we don't have an econ program anymore, but Paul Volcker was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, appointed by Ronald Reagan. We had high inflation when Reagan took over under Jimmy Carter. Under Carter, we had really high inflation. And Paul Volcker he raised interest rates and put the economy into a recession, and he squeezed inflation out of the system, and we haven't had it since. Okay? So he came up with a rule. He stepped in because he's so highly respected, and it limits bank investments in speculative hedge and private equity funds. Once again, we dismantled Glass-Steagall, which kept banks out of investing in these speculative areas, and so then we let them go back in and do it. And then a hedge fund is a relatively new, type of business, maybe 30 years old. Private equity funds is an old business. We used to call it, back in my day, we called it venture capital. Now they call it private equity. But if you're really cool, you just call it PE. You're in the know. And in proprietary trading. What is proprietary trading? That's when the banks speculate. You have traders, investment traders employed at the bank, in a department of the bank, and they're not trading on behalf of customers. They are trading the bank's money. Okay? And there have been scandal after scandal. There's one in London where the bank lost billions, and the trader covered it up as long as he could. Eventually, you can't hide a $5 billion loss. It's going to show up at some point, and it did. So proprietary trading. Okay? And when you look at the financial statements and you hear the quarterly reports made by these financial companies, they will say, we made or lost this much in our proprietary trading operation this quarter. Okay? Sometimes they make money, and sometimes they lose money. Okay? So the next time you're tempted to, and you think that you've uncovered some brilliant investment idea, remember that the smartest people on the planet who do this proprietary trading, sometimes they make money, and sometimes they lose money. It's gambling. It's speculation. Now, it could be informed gambling or speculation, but if you do something over the short term, you're rolling the dice. It's okay as long as you understand that. It's okay. All right. Created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it protects consumers who are involved with mortgages, student loans, and credit cards. Okay? And I'll tell you this, the Republicans screamed bloody murder. The Democrats wanted this. The Republicans screamed bloody murder because the Republicans were representing the interest of the bankers, and the bankers didn't want their customers to really understand what was going on. It's good for the customers, and it's that struggle between the regulators and the regulated. All right. Capital and liquidity, it increased the amount of capital and strengthened the definition of capital to reduce the likelihood of bank failures. Okay? That's what this law did. Okay? Really important. We'll look at the Basel rules as well and get a better understanding of this. All right, created the Financial Stability Oversight Council. So as I said, there are lots of regulators out there, and they weren't communicating with each other. And so nobody really knew everything that was going on. So they created this group that said, okay, we want all you guys to get together and talk about what's going on in the industry so that everybody will get a better sense of what the big picture is. Okay? And we want to monitor the big companies, too big to fail. We've got to stay on top of them and keep them from treading into dangerous waters. Okay? And that included insurance companies, because the big insurance companies made these bad investments and also sold credit default swaps, which is a form of bond insurance, that bankrupted them. Okay? Then they looked at derivatives, which are futures and options, these credit default swaps, and the companies that were involved in these contracts, and said, we need to step in and regulate. Okay? So the brokerage firms and the options trading companies got together, and they were authorized to regulate the trading of derivatives. Prior to this law, and this is important, derivatives were being traded privately they were contracts between two parties. Okay? And now they're saying no, they need to be standardized, and there needs to be a group that will step in if one party fails to deliver, either the money or the product. Here's the problem. Nobody knew how many contracts existed, what exposure existed. Okay? So, one of the things that the government asked the strong financial institutions to do during the crisis was to buy the weak companies. And the strong companies did not want to do that, primarily because there were derivatives involved. So a strong company didn't want to buy a weak company and then find out that the weak company was exposed to enough derivatives that had gone bad that could bankrupt the strong company. Nobody knew how much was out there. What if Bank of America buys Merrill Lynch, and then we find out that Merrill Lynch has $5 trillion worth of derivatives that have gone bad that they're supposed to deliver on? And that $5 trillion will bankrupt Merrill Lynch, and it will also bankrupt us. So how did the federal government get around it? They said, okay, if you buy Merrill Lynch, the first $1 trillion is on you. Anything above that, the federal government will bail you out. They gave them a loss limit. Okay? Brilliant idea, actually. It got Bank of America to buy Merrill Lynch. Okay? And just the confidence of it stopped the run on the derivatives. All right, large bank liquidation. They set about to create a process to liquidate banks in ways that minimize the impact of the financial system. So they didn't want to wait for trouble to happen to come up with a plan. They said, here is our plan for any bank that gets into trouble. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and so on. Let's plan in advance, and if we have to make some changes to meet certain unique circumstances, we'll do that. But we got to plan in advance. All right, so that was Dodd-Frank. Y'all need to watch so it was Christopher Dodd, who was a senator from Connecticut, and Barney Frank, and I think he was from New York. I can't remember exactly. Y'all want to hear a nut job? Y'all call up video clips of Barney Frank. Barney Frank was a nut job. They're both still alive. All right. The Basel Accords, or Basel Accords, named after the city of Switzerland, because that's where the meetings were held. Okay? So this is an international arrangement or treaty. And it provides a standard set of regulations for banks around the world. Okay? Everybody wanted to be on the same standards. Okay? And so this is for banks that want to operate across country lines, which are these big money center banks. And we saw a list of them. They're all over the world, from every capitalist country has at least one bank that does business internationally. Okay? So they happen in 3 different levels. So first, Basel I, 1988. Okay? And it created a minimum capital requirements. And that's what Basel's really focused on, is capital. Making sure there's protection in the system. Okay? Okay. And the focus here is on the risk that parties that owe the bank money, or that have issued securities that the bank owns, so the bank invests in these securities, will fail to pay the bank back. So the focus is on the customer and its securities that the bank owns. So banks have assets, and they invest those assets in securities and in loans. And Basel created a list of 5 groups of investments. Okay? And the groups are all based on certain risk. Risk that the bank could lose money. And each group requires the bank to hold a certain amount of capital.